finance fluency. I'm going to be talking about bookkeeping. I'm going to be talking about enterprise budgeting. I'm going to talk about financial statements. I'm going to be talking about loans. And it's all going to be like 30,000 foot level because we just don't have time to get into all of these things all at once. We had sort of a tall order to cover all of this stuff in one session. But my name is Andy Larson. I work for a little shop called the Food Finance Institute. I am test driving a brand new PowerPoint template from our marketing professional. So if any of the animations are goofy or screwed up, I apologize in advance, but I'll see if I can make them work. So the Food Finance Institute consists of some consulting staff and also all of our uh, behind the curtain staff that make everything work. But we have expertise in farm food systems and food brands. We've got a number of different consultants with a wide variety of experience in the dairy industry, food processing industry. I'm small and mid-scale farm, value-added agriculture type of industry. Cheese, pasta, like we represent a lot of different things in agriculture. So if you are looking for experience-based expertise in building small, medium scale food and farm businesses, we would love you to consider us a resource. We also recognize that Michigan has some really, really expansive options for helping with those kind of things as well. And that was expansive, not expensive. Uh, so I think it is a really good thing that you're here to learn about some of these folks who can help you with the numbers and the business development and the other, fun nerdery that comes along with farming that you didn't necessarily sign up for, right? All of this I'm very aware, hyper aware, as a matter of fact, that farmers don't love the book side of things. That is not why you signed up for this gig. You wanted to be your own boss. You wanted to have your hands in the dirt. You wanted to do all that kind of stuff. I'm going to try and make it fun. I'm going to try and make it interesting. I'm going to tell stupid jokes and you don't have to laugh. But so hopefully I'll keep you engaged on some stuff that I know you consider as sort of second tier in your prioritization. But hopefully we can start getting some of you to think about it as first tier. So we'll help farm businesses build financial skills. We'll help them build business models. And we'll talk about what I mean when I say a business model because it's sort of a complicated puzzle. Getting access to capital. I was a lender at a small community bank for a number of years. I have gotten familiar with a lot of conventional and unconventional sources of capital over the years, whether it be banks or CDFIs or unbanks or investors or grant makers, or we actually are pretty fortunate in agriculture to have a wide swath of different types of financing sources that we can use to help kind of make our business dreams come true. Um, but like people are asking about in the chat, the first thing we got to figure out about our farms is whether or not our business models are profitable and resilient. Like those are the things that are absolutely required before we're ever going to get into a situation where we can buy a farm, hire labor, get into loans, that kind of thing. But this whole buying a farm deal is like so at the forefront in everybody's mindset, especially when they're first dreaming about being a farmer. It's like, okay, so I want to be a farmer. How do I buy a farm? And it's interesting that that's not always the right place to start. Buying a farm is a massive financial obligation, often. It often is a massive financial obligation. And there's some things that sort of have to, foundationally exist before we buy that farm. So this is kind of the tree that I had in my mind. It's like, okay, everybody wants to buy a farm. What do we have to do before we can actually do that, before we can make that kind of transaction a reality? So you start at the bottom. You got to have a profitable business model. If you're not throwing off any profit from your business model, you can't make a loan payment. So profitable business model leads to repayment capacity. The second thing you need is to be able to prove that you've got a profitable business model. So good bookkeeping becomes essential. So we'll start talking about some bookkeeping options, some bookkeeping habits that are going to allow you to create good financial statements that are accurate, complete, and up to date so they actually paint the picture of what's happening in your farm business. When you've got those two puzzle pieces put together, you might be able to apply for a loan depending on where you are you're interested in getting that financing from. And almost all of you, in order to get into buying a farm, are going to need a loan. There's some other options besides having a loan. You can inherit a farm, or you can work a fancy job that makes a whole lot of salary so that you can pay for a farm with your off the farm job. Those are all options. But inherently, most farms have skinny enough profit margins that we have to sharpen our pencils, know what we're producing from a profitability standpoint, season in and season out, to know whether or not we can make that loan payment to buy that farm. So that's kind of how I am organizing this talk. We're going to start there at the bottom with business models and bookkeeping, and we're going to show you how that supports getting into an actual land purchase. And then at the very end, I know that everybody's land access journey, for lack of a better term, is different and potentially long. I have a number of clients who have been seeking, their forever farm for a number of years. And so I do want to sort of have a discussion at the end about land access, how to make it more affordable, how to make it easier. But much of that is going to be couched in becoming eligible for financing. So let's start at the beginning. Like I said, test driving a new format. These blue sides are sort of the section headers, and then the orange ones will be all of the content. But so profitable business model leads to repayment capacity. If you don't have any profit on the P&L, which is the P&L and the income statement, they're the same thing. Why they call them two different things, who the heck knows? But if there's no profit on your P&L, then you can't afford financing, at least not from the farm. So the first thing we've got to do is make sure that we've got a profitable business model. And like I said, this is sort of a puzzle that we're putting together. All of these different things could be an hour-long seminar in and of themselves. As a matter of fact, I've done hour-long seminars on almost all of these things here. But in order to have a profitable business model, you have to have a value proposition. You have to have a thing that people want and are willing to pay for, and your values align with their values, and there's a what's in it for them when they're doing that transaction. You've got to have customer segments who want to buy those benefits and they want to actually pay a sustainable price for those benefits. You've got to figure out how to reach those customers through market channels. You got to be able to identify with them, with your brand when they reach those customers. So there's all of that market alignment that becomes extraordinarily important in building a farm business. And that's the thing that we oftentimes tend to overlook, is that you do have to put on your marketing professional hat a little, at least for a few minutes every day, to make sure that what you're doing with your business is aligning with the brand creation that you inherently have to do as a farmer, especially as a direct market farmer. You need people, either yourself or folks that you hire. You need efficient production systems so those people can get their work done in the amount of time that they actually have available. You need to be able to get through skinny months. I don't know about you guys, but like February, March really sucks on my farm. So I'm a poultry farmer. We produce eggs for restaurants and retail stores, and it always feels like Q1 is a lot of money out the door, and not near as much proportionally coming back in, despite the fact that eggs gets produced year round, believe it or not. So that's really important to know how to get over some of those cash flow gaps. We have lumpy cash flows in agriculture, especially if you're upper Midwest and you're producing crops or specialty crops. Man, all those expenditures in Q1 in order to come into revenues in Q3, how do you get through that gap in between? You got to be able to get to your products to where they are, and you have to. This is like the big one down here at the bottom, you guys. This scale thing. A lot of early career farmers just start, right? There's value to that. Getting your hands in the dirt, getting some experience in production, getting some experience in market development, all of those things are really, really cool. But if we have a certain objective, we want to replace our off the farm income. We want to be able to pay the property taxes. We want to just freaking break even this year. You have a profitability objective, and keeping that profitability objective squarely in your line of sight throughout the growing season is important. But if you haven't aligned the scale at which you're producing to see whether or not it can actually produce the profitability benefits over the course of the season, you might be mismatched. You might be misaligned with the scale at which you're farming and the profit that you think that that farm can create. So those are all the things that go into well, not all, most of the things that go into a business model. If that starts to feel hard to quantify, if you've never used a lean business model canvas before, this is sort of like a one pane, one window, one dashboard, whatever you want to call it, one page way to think about your business plan. You think about your customers' problems, what they're using right now, what the solution is that you could offer, what customer segments you're selling to, who's the early adopters, how are you reaching them. So all of that in support of trying to come up with this defensively unique value proposition. We say that in FFI all the time. So you can get this from the Iconic website. The tilburguniversity.edu/iconic website has this as a infillable PDF. It's my favorite lean canvas template that's out there. It's my fail fast forward tool. When I have an idea for a farm enterprise, I want to run it through this template first. Like, do I have a customer? Do I have a solution that they're willing to pay for? How do I reach them? How am I different? How am I difficult to copy from anybody else on my market landscape? My wife and I had another couple come up to us during a bluegrass music festival and said, "We want to be you. We want to copy your business. We want to be an egg producer. We want to sell to restaurants and retail stores." And he said, "Cool. Where do you guys hail from?" They lived on the same road as us, 4 miles to the north. And we're just like, we're both sustainable ag educators. We're both beginning farmer educators. And we're like, so we've got to teach people to be our direct competition, like right here on the same road in the same market landscape. That feels hard. And so that it brought this defensively unique value proposition squarely into focus for us. How are we different? How are we hard to copy? What are we doing that other people might not have an easy time doing? So becomes a really, really important part of examining your business model. Now, if you're going to do one thing and one thing only in order to sort of figure out the answer to some of those questions you all were asking in the chat early on, am I profitable? Am I making money? Is this working for me? Am I a sustainable business? Am I a resilient business? Or am I playing in the dirt and supporting it with my off the farm job? Both of those things are perfectly viable options, but most people are aspiring to be the former rather than the latter. So I have a tool for you here. It's called an enterprise budget. You guys, many of you have heard of this before. Most of you do budgeting in your household. This is not that different from household budgeting. It's just got one little wrinkle in there that I want to hammer home real quick. That wrinkle is right here in the top bullet. It's determining your variable costs, the costs of production for any unit of output, versus your overhead costs, which are your costs of being in business. Everybody here, or many of you, have probably filled out a Schedule F for tax purposes, right? And the Schedule F would lead a farmer to believe that there is a big bucket of revenues, a big bucket of expenses, and then a simple subtraction problem to determine how much profitability is left on the bottom line, if any. I would endeavor to say that one more twist on that equation is going to make you a better financial manager for your business, and that's separating your costs of production. For every unit, you have this much increased cost. So for every dozen eggs, I have feed, a carton, and a sticker. For every acre of corn, someone has got seed, they've got fertility, and they've got tractor wear and tear. For every 100 feet of row, you've got tomato seeds, you've got trellising, you've got weeding time, you've got harvest time and cooling. So like for every unit that you produce, you're going to have a 1x increase in production costs. Those are your costs of production. For everything that does not vary by output, think about advertising, think about your insurance premium, think about your property taxes, think about, all those things that are just sort of the costs of being in business. Those are your overheads. Those don't necessarily increase with every unit of output. So if you're going to do one thing to determine whether or not your farm business is profitable and sustainable, it's separate out the costs of production and the overhead costs. If you can separate those two things out, you are going to have a much more direct path to examining whether or not you're profitable. Okay. And I can send this little template that I've made around by email or send it through Jazz or whatever. I'll get it in your hands. Um, the thing that I want you to be aware of is that these fixed expenses are not okay. Let me start over. Farmers get stopped up trying to figure out how much of their fixed expenses they should allocate to different enterprises. How much of this capital investment should I charge to my chickens versus my beef versus my vegetables? How much of my advertising should I charge to my chickens versus my, and like the thing that I see most often is like the type A personalities are like, I don't know how to divide this out perfectly. And they flip the monopoly board and they stop. They don't finish their enterprise budgeting because that thing frustrates them. This has a blunt instrument built into it, which is that however much of your fixed expense there happens to be, it's just going to get allocated by your percent of sales. So if I'm 53% of sales represented by free range eggs, 53% of $456 is going to get thrown into those overheads. And 47% for the heritage hogs. That's all it is. Is that perfect? Is that ideal? No. Like I said, it's a very blunt instrument, but it does try to help you give an indication of whether or not that enterprise is paying its full freight. And the reason I'm going to send this afterwards is because if I send it now, everyone will just be messing around in this and not, listening to the rest of the seminar. So, well, we'll send it around after the fact as your reward for completing your survey. The other thing that I want to point out here is that we are sometimes a little laissez-faire about labor. And the reason we are is because we don't actually pay ourselves by the hour as farmers. I went from, okay, so pay attention to these numbers right down here at the bottom, gross profit margin, okay? 53% gross profit margin in eggs, 31% gross profit margin in hogs. So all the gross profit margin is just sales minus cost of production, right? So 53% and 31%, boy, these look really pretty good. I think I'm going to expand the egg production because that's got the better profit margin of the two. But how much time am I spending in these things? So the next little animation as I put my and my wife's time at 20 bucks an hour into these two things. So 53 and 31% GPA gross profit margin becomes 7 and 23 when I factor in the hours. Now, I know not everybody keeps track of their hours on the farm, and that's okay. You can have sort of a swag, sort of a wild guess as to how many hours you're spending. This is particularly important when you are deciding whether to add an enterprise. If you don't have the bandwidth to add the hours that are necessary to make this enterprise profitable, it is not the right enterprise for you to add. There is a whole resource on the last slide of this deck to a Michigan publication about figuring out hours, figuring out bandwidth for your different types of enterprises. So that use that as a important tool. Now that you can split out these two type of costs, you have a direct pathway to increasing your profitability. Direct pathway. And there's 4 different ways to do it, and these are in rank order. Like the top one is the easiest pathway, the bottom one is the hardest pathway. If you can increase prices, if you know your customers well enough to know that they have a higher willingness to pay than what you're currently charging, you're leaving money on the table, and you can increase your profitability without any associated costs. Save a few new, like, pricing stickers or whatever. That's the easy one. What I found is that most value-added direct market type of farmers are pretty good about trying to keep their prices right near the ceilings that people will tolerate. So the other 3 become particularly important. Increasing sales, knowing exactly what the profitability is with so the gross margin contribution, for those of you who want to learn your finance and accounting terminology, for every unit you sell, there's this much profitability in it. If you know that there's good profitability, you can increase that volume. Increasing that volume does not come without cost. You've either got to scale up your own enterprise, which costs something, or you've got to buy in product from another farmer, which costs something. So you can improve your velocity, you can improve your throughput, you can make it more, you can make it bigger, you can make it faster, but it is not without cost. Decreasing your variable cost, your cost of production. If you can reduce costs of production by a small increment, that is going to multiply out by every unit you sell all year long. If I can reduce my feed cost by 1%, that's going to save me hundreds of dollars over the course of a year. If I can improve my feed cost by 30%, which I just did recently, I'm going to save myself thousands of dollars per year. Like, those things are humongous. If you can focus on your cost of production and get those things as dialed in as you possibly can, shop around for packaging, shop around for seed, shop around for feed, you are going to improve your profitability faster than simply, number 4, optimizing your overheads. You can switch insurance companies, and you can knock some money off of your premium for every 6 months or whatever, and that's fine, but that only happens one time. It does not multiply out. If you save $200, it's $200 in your pocket. Whereas if you save 20 cents on feed or 20 cents on, labor, well, that's hard. But if you save 20 cents on feed, that's going to be hundreds of dollars right away. So those are the things that the one thing I would have you do is do an enterprise budget for the main enterprises on your farm. Know their profitability, know their gross profit margin. And then you can examine which part of those models to fix in order to become more profitable faster. In order to do all this fun stuff, we have to write something. We have to stop playing on the farm. We have to stop hanging out with our chickens or with our specialty crops or whatever it is. And we have to sit in front of the computer and we have to do some freaking accounting. It's not fun. At least not for a lot of us. It's fun for a few people. I've met them. They're interesting. But you've got to have good bookkeeping in order to know whether you're profitable and whether to produce these kind of enterprise budgets or accurate financial statements that are going to support a loan application. Why are financial statements important? Because they're the universal language of business. Everybody who is in the financial and accounting sector, whatever service provider you might be working with, they know how to read one of those things, and they know the story that thing is telling you. So you better be telling an accurate story about your farm business. Because if you're screwing up your financial statements, you are inaccurately portraying the goodness or the badness of the business model of your farm. In other words, garbage in, garbage out. If you have got an accounting system that is inaccurate, it is not up to date, it is producing financial statements with a lot of weird things on them. And I know for a fact that farmers, they hit that button on QuickBooks and it says, make me a balance sheet. And then they hand it to their banker because I was that banker. And I would ask them a question. It's like, so this is weird. Why do you have a negative number in this space? Every single person answered me with, well, that's just a weird thing that QuickBooks does. I don't really understand it. It's not just a weird thing that QuickBooks does, and you don't understand it. And that's why it's giving a red flag as to whether or not you are certain about the accuracy of your financial statements, which gives you questions as to the accuracy of your record keeping as well. So let's start with record keeping, give you some great options for that, get up into financial statements and how those are supportive of a loan application. Like I said, you guys, this is fast and there's a lot of it. And so if you've got questions, please do throw them into the chat so Erin can make me aware that they are there. There are so many options for bookkeeping out there, and most of them are online, cloud-based software. Most of them cost you something. Some of them are good, some of them are better than others. There is a reticence amongst farmers to do two different things. One is to make their financial information out there in the cloud because they don't trust where it's going. Two is to pay anything monthly, like for a subscription for a piece of software to do a job that they don't really want to do. So I'm here to tell you, you can be a good farm financial business manager with something as simple as a spreadsheet. It's possible. But if you're going to do it that way, I want you to pick a good one that does more than just record the pluses and minuses, the ins and outs of your farm checking account. They need to be categorized appropriately. They need to be described well. They need to be put into Schedule F categories. They need to support month by month cash flow summaries and profitability of enterprises. All of these things that we're talking about are only so good if they don't allow you to make financial decisions with the information that they spit out the other end. This link right down here at the bottom goes to the farm accounting page at Missouri Extension. Everything else I'm going to talk about today is from Michigan, but this one's from Missouri, okay? Sorry. They have got what they call the farm record book, and they've got a farm record book that's specifically built for specialty crops. So if you're a fruit, a veg, a flower, an herb, whatever, the specialty crop one is the right one for you. It is a spreadsheet. It is not attached to any online source. It allows you to categorize monies in and monies out on your farm according to Schedule F categories. You do have to do a lot of it manually, right? Because it's not connected to the internet. It's not just pulling in the transactions from the online portal of your farm checking account, which can sometimes be good because you're not just pulling in a weird automatically generated description from your bank and you are categorizing it correctly the first time instead of having to sort of teach your accounting system how to categorize different types of transactions. So that accuracy is really useful, but it's manual. So it is going to take you a little bit more time to recreate those things. The thing that's wild about it is like those of you, okay, if you have not already separated your personal checking account and your farm checking account, freaking do it. Like today. Because it is overwhelming to see how many times we swipe our debit card for random crap that is not farm related. And so going through several thousand transactions in order to pick out the couple hundred that are farm transactions adds to the onerousness of that job like many fold. So have a separate farm checking account, have a separate farm debit card, create yourself that financial breadcrumb trail just for the farm. That way you're entering less transactions into this doohickey. And if you go into this link, you'll be able to see that as you record transactions, it's going to create, oh, I don't have it here. I have it later in the presentation. Um, it's going to create a month by month cash flow for you. These are the months where money came in. These are the months where money came out. This is where we came out positive. This is where we came out negative. Oh, Andy, your February and March months came out really negative. What are you going to do to bridge that gap? That's an important piece of knowledge for your farm business. Not only knowing whether the business model is profitable, but when it's profitable and when it's not, so that you can put the plan in place to bridge that gap. And the other thing that almost none of our other spreadsheets that are available out there on the inner tubes do is do an enterprise by enterprise, product by product profitability examination, just from the transactions going in related to that enterprise and the transactions going out related to that enterprise. It gives you a net number at the end of the year to give you some indication of how profitable that thing that you're doing was. One little pro tip, insider tip, if you do decide to use this template, make one enterprise called something like farm overheads or something like that, because there will be expenditures that you make that are not attributed to one specific enterprise. If you have to fix the mower, that's not attributed to one specific enterprise, that becomes an overhead. Okay. So that way you know that there's some place to put everything, even if it's not easily allocated to one particular pursuit. If you want to use accounting software, there is a bunch of them out there. And there is a whole document from your MSU extension farm management team about which ones are plausible. Ambrook and FarmRaise, they are kind of like QuickBooks, but they're sustainable ag farm specific. They are cloud-based. They do have a subscription fee. PC Mars and Easy Farm are both desktop like sandbox things. They're software that you pay for one time, unless there's updates or modules or whatever. But they are also farm specific. Even being farm specific doesn't necessarily mean that they are sustainable ag, regenerative ag, value added farm specific. That becomes a little bit more complicated. PC Mars is built for conventional farms. Ambrook and FarmRaise are a little bit more sustainable aggie oriented. So if you want to have a subscription for a powerful online accounting system that is built with farms in mind, those two are the options. However, they are not the ones that is not the accounting language that is spoken by tax accountants the world over. QuickBooks right here, that one's spoken by tax accountants the world over. And you pay something, and it's a really long learning curve, and people don't love it. But man, the power that it creates as far as reporting capabilities is unmatched. There are low cost and free even versions of things. Wave and Zoho are two that I've become aware of. I've used Wave. You can do quite a bit just with a free subscription. It will attach to your farm checking account. It will download and categorize transactions automatically. Not perfectly, but automatically. So some of these things are worth trying out if you are online bookkeeping curious, right? It's a good way to get into it for free without a massive, long, expensive commitment. The most essential thing that you can do if you get into any of these systems is to set up your chart of accounts correctly the first time. Especially if you're going into one of these more generalist type of softwares, they're not necessarily going to have things perfectly set up for a farm. We're a little weird, y'all, if you hadn't picked up on that, okay? And so it might take a little bit of time with an extension specialist, with a QuickBooks Pro, with somebody that works for CRFS or FFI or wherever. Find yourself a nerd that has worked with charts of accounts before and have them help you set yours up right from the get-go. Why? Because that avoids some of that archaeological digging that you have to do later when you're applying for your first farm loan and things don't look right. Not having to go back and fix everything from the beginning of your farming career in your accounting system is such a time saver. Even if you have to pay somebody to help you do that chart of accounts right the first time, pay that person. It's going to pay you dividends in the long run. Please recommend good free accounting or bookkeeping for specialty crops. Okay, so the spreadsheet version was the one I had on the last slide. There's a farm record book for specialty crops from Missouri Extension. That's the one I recommend. If you're going to do free online accounting, Wave and Zoho are the two that you could do most of what you need to do, including online transactions, including invoicing, including a lot of stuff for free. The things that you don't get are accepting credit cards, like the merchant side of things, and doing payroll. So those both cost more. And they're always going to try and upsell you. There's going to be a pop-up every 5 frickin' seconds that says, "Oh, you look like you want to be able to run payroll. You should buy this payroll mod." Like, it's just part of the business model, you guys. And so you have to tolerate that. It's like ads on YouTube, right? Okay. All of this good accounting that you're going to do, if you're not already doing, is going to lead to good financial statements. Good financial statements are your intellectual currency when you're dealing with any kind of financial service provider. If you can tell the story of what your farm business model is doing with a couple of one-page documents, you are going to be in like Flint. Like, it helps a lot. So the funny thing about ag is that our financial statements look just a little bit different. We have current, intermediate, and long-term categories on our balance sheets. And by the way, this is just a very classic one-page balance sheet that squishes together the farm and the personal. At the end, I have a link for something that doesn't squish together the farm and the personal, and that's a balance sheet template from Michigan State University Extension. And the reason that that's useful is because if you ever want to be an FSA customer, they're going to ask for your balance sheet to tease out the farm and the personal. This is part of the FSA 2001. If you haven't already dealt with FSA, they speak in forms and numbers. And the FSA 2001 is their application for credit assistance, like their general loan app, and it has a balance sheet built into it. And it's going to look a lot like the one that Michigan State makes available. So please, please, please use that resource. Current, intermediate, and long-term assets instead of just current and fixed. Every other industry just uses current and fixed. Why? I don't know, because they make things simpler than we do. They also don't use market valuations for stuff. They use a cost valuation of whatever it is that they bought, a vehicle, and then they put a negative number underneath for how much depreciation has accrued to that vehicle. We don't do that in agriculture. We generally use market valuation for stuff. It's easy generally for us to do market valuation for stuff because the things that we have nice liquid secondary markets that it's easy to get prices from. Oh, what are my calves worth? I'll go on the report from the local livestock auction and get a dollar amount. Oh, what is my tractor worth? I'll go on Tractor House and I'll find something with similar brand and similar hours, similar loader, whatever it is, and find a value for that. We're very fortunate that in agriculture, that thing is relatively simple to be able to do. So, current assets, this is just the basic language of balance sheets. Current assets and current liabilities, those are the ones that are taking place within the upcoming year. So in the asset side, it's cash and cash equivalents. And what do I mean when I say cash equivalent? Anything that could be converted to cash within the space of the calendar year. That's your market livestock, that's your crop inventory, that's any prepaids if you bought seed or you bought fertilizer, all that stuff is going to get converted to cash within the upcoming year. So that's a current asset. A current liability is one that has to be paid in the upcoming year. So any bills that you haven't paid yet, if you have any short-term operating notes, this is where it starts to be for the banker, you guys. The balance sheets they're partially for you, but they're partially for the banker too. And when they start to tease out the principal and interest due within 12, if you see the acronyms CPITD or CPLTD, that is current portion of intermediate term debt or current portion of long-term debt, that helps the banker understand what kind of load you have as far as making debt payments in any given year. The other sort of inside baseball thing that I want you guys to be aware of is that credit card balances, even if you're not going to pay them off within the space of the upcoming year, they all show up as a current liability. Why? I think it's because theoretically, any credit card can call the balance due at any time. I haven't read those end user license agreements either, you guys, but I think that's the legal reason why they show up as a current liability. The bummer about that is if you've racked up a bunch of credit card balances in order to get your farm started, that starts to make your liquidity look crappy. Like, oh man, I've got more liabilities than I've got assets in the upcoming year. What is that going to do for my cash flow situation? Okay, real quick, intermediate, that's your tractors, that's your over-the-road vehicles, that's your semis, that's all that stuff, plus breeding livestock. So if you got cows, if you got sows, if you got plows, those things are all intermediate assets, okay? And intermediate liabilities are the loans that you have against those intermediate assets. That's all that is. I know there's all sorts of crappy terminology on this sheet that is hard to understand and hard to remember. Within the upcoming year, what do I own and what do I owe? Within the upcoming 1 to 10 years, what do I own and what do I owe? And then down here at the bottom, the long-term stuff, that's real estate and real estate improvements. And when I say real estate improvements, I mean stuff that's permanently affixed to real estate buildings, grain setups, machine sheds, wash packs, all that kind of stuff, real estate improvement. And these long-term liabilities are the loans that you have against those real estate assets. Mostly that's going to be mortgages. Every once in a while, there's something funny that shows up that's really, really long-term, like the economic injury disaster loans that they came out with during COVID. Those are 30 years long. So all that stuff shows up on the balance sheet as current, intermediate, and long-term. I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes here how a banker reads this thing like a menu when they're underwriting your loan. So hold that thought. We're going to go to the next one. We're going to go to the income statement. Isn't a Schedule F an income statement? Kinda. Your Schedule F is a tax document. And people who are professionals with tax documents tend to have a different objective than a financial statement. My tax accountant wants me to pay as few income taxes as possible. Why? Well, because he's been trained by almost 40 years worth of doing taxes with farmers that farmers don't like to pay income taxes. Ah, surprise. I have a different message, you guys. Make money, plan for income taxes, and pay income taxes. I know that's sort of anathema in the entrepreneurial world, but if you don't plan for profitability, if you only plan to hide profitability, it's going to pervert the incentives of your business model and you're going to be less resilient because you're trying to be less profitable rather than more. You guys, make money, pay taxes, but plan for it so it doesn't surprise you on April the 15th. Okay, so a tax document is designed in a lot of ways to optimize your income tax burden. Okay? Does it give you information about your business model? Yes, it does. Does it give you the same information about your business model as an income statement would? Not necessarily. Here's my income statement from the exact same year. And what you'll notice is a whole lot of numbers being a whole lot of different. Okay, in both the income and the expense categories. Okay, so look here on this left-hand column first. This left-hand column for Example Farm LLC, that's the same kind of categories as what you got over here. These are the same kind of categories as what you got down here. Most templates that are available for farms are kind of built on the same categories as the Schedule F is. But the Schedule F has got some funky non-cash stuff in it. One of those things is depreciation. And coming from an industry where we own a lot of things, we often accrue a fair amount of depreciation, right? Nobody writes a check for depreciation. So it's a non-cash cost. Business use of the home, $1,500 for me to use part of my basement as an off. Like, okay, so we're starting to get into the weeds of things that we can write off in order to optimize our income tax burden. Do I have that on my income statement over here? Hell no, I don't. I didn't write a check for $1,500 to use my house. So this and this look pretty much the same, but they've got a few different numbers in there. This over here is where things start to get interesting. If you've never heard the term accrual adjustments before, it doesn't mean you're using accrual accounting. You're still using cash accounting, but accrual adjustments more accurately represent the cash position of your farm business by talking to the current assets and current liabilities section of your balance sheet. So accrual adjustments will account for changes in inventory amounts. If you had 10,000 bushel of corn in the bin at the end of last year because prices were crappy and you wanted to hold it and sell it in March, cool. But then the next year, the prices are good in November, so you sell it before the end of the year and you got a pile of cash, but nothing in the bin. So which year is going to look better? Well, to the tax accountant, they're going to see a big pile of cash that second year. They're like, all right, you're doing really good. Last year was crappy. What happened? Because you sold that bin twice in the space of the second year. So if you're not accounting for some of those balances, and it doesn't have to be corn in the bin, it could be livestock on the pasture, it can be, roots in the cellar, it can be jars in the on-farm retail store, whatever it is, all those things are worth something. They are current assets, they are cash equivalents, they more accurately represent your cash position if you've got your inventories accounted for. Some of you, I recognize that this may be the first time you're getting exposed to some of this stuff. It's not going to sink in the first time, but it is the first of however many exposures you need for this stuff to sink into your brain. So if it feels boring, sorry, it's an essential concept and you needed to be exposed to it, and it will come home to roost in the not too distant future of your farming career. The last one, which I'm not going to dwell on except for one point, the statement of cash flows is the third big financial statement that nobody does, at least not in this format. I'll show you the way that we do it. What it is recognizing is that we have three different types of cash flows on our farm. Why doesn't the income statement show me what my balance is in my farm checking account? Because there's some pretty big cash utilizations that aren't accounted for on the income statement. When you pay a loan payment, the principal portion of that loan payment does not show up on your P&L. The interest does. That was an expense. That was the rent on other people's money, right? But the principal portion is just giving it back to who it belongs to initially. So that doesn't show up on the P&L. When you buy a tractor, it doesn't show up as $30,000 expense on the P&L. That was a cash flow from investing, because what will show up is a little bit of depreciation every year for the potential useful life of that capital asset. So what I'm saying is that this operating part, the cash flow from operating activities, that's just your income statement. The numbers that go here are from the bottom of your income statement. That's how your income statement talks to your statement of cash flows. All of these things talk to one another. But then the investing activities, buying and selling capital assets, which we do a fair amount of in farming world, and then cash flows from financing activities, receiving loan proceeds, paying loan proceeds back. And that includes from yourself. If you are making a personal investment in your farm, if you are drawing personal money out of your farm, those cash flows show up on your statement of cash flows as well. However, I wanted you to know that concept about the three different type of cash flows. I would never say that you have to create this statement exactly like it's shown on the screen. There's a template for it from Michigan State University Extension. Thank you very much. But a month by month cash flow, like we were talking about with our bookkeeping template, is going to provide so much more value to you than this is. This will estimate pretty closely what your, balance is in your checking account, but you could check that on an app on your phone. Understanding these three different types of cash flows and why they don't all show up on the P&L is the important concept here. Okay. We are 2/3 of the way through, you guys. We got a little bit left, and we're getting to the meat and potatoes of the issue. The crux of this issue is that if I want to get myself into land, I need to have all that crap in place so I can apply for a loan and get a mortgage to buy a farm. And so many people are like, no, I don't want to go into debt. It's terrible. Debt is awful. Debt killed a whole generation of farmers in the 80s. I'm like, okay, I get it. Stuff went wrong then. I get it. But when you have all of the other trappings that we've already discussed, you have the financial management capability to use debt as a tool and not have it be weaponized. I'm here to tell you right now, as a former banker, the banker does not want your stuff. The banker doesn't want your tractor. The banker doesn't want your crops. The banker doesn't even want your land. That's not what they're in it for. You know what they're in it for? Interest. Interest is what makes their world go round. Paying them rent on the money they lend you. That's what keeps their lights on. That's what pays their bonus at the end of the year. That's all they want. Make your loan payments as agreed with interest, and your banker is going to be happy. And they're not going to come after your stuff. That is a last-ditch effort if you are incommunicative, unsuccessful, and go and hide your head in that sand when things are going wrong. Okay. Couple quick things about choosing a lender. And yeah, I found this statue and I thought it was hilarious how much it looks like a lot of lenders I know. So when you're choosing a bank, it does, or not necessarily a bank, a financial institution, bank, credit union, FCS, Farm Credit Services, Cooperative, Unbank, Michigan Good Food Fund, whatever. Do it for a couple of different reasons. The local reputation or the local reputation that you, the local relationship or reputation that you have with the bank on Main Street in your hometown could be very valuable. Okay. They might know a lot about agriculture. They might know a lot about your family, which could be a pro or a con, depending on your family. And they could be a perfect partner for you. The bank on Main Street in my hometown is an ag bank. They were a good partner for me to get an agricultural loan from. Not every bank is that way. Banks have specialties. And the people who work at banks have specialties. If you walk into a credit union in Illinois and you look for a really complicated agricultural loan, you're going to get a lot of blank stares. They're not usually in that business. There might be some exceptions, but they're not usually in that business. So if the agriculture side of things is not part of the bank's specialty, find another bank. Even if you leave your personal stuff at your bank on Main Street and you go somewhere else for your farm checking account, for your farm lending and financing, it's fine. There's nothing sinful about that. Support two banks. Because going somewhere that has the appropriate specialty is going to make your lending life dramatically better. And I think that the bank who does not have that specialty would much rather pass it off to somebody who knows what they're doing than to try to learn it themselves. Last but not, so the one great way to tell this is if you look at your local bank's website and they don't have a tab that says ag lending or something similar to that, it might not be the perfect fit for your farm. Last but not least, check and see if they have any existing partnerships with credit enhancing agencies like the Farm Services Agency or the Small Business Administration. Yes, farmers can get farm loans from the SBA. My first farm loan was from the SBA. The rate was high, and I got out of it quickly, but it did work because why? I had very little collateral. I had a whole bunch of chickens in a crappy old coop and some feeders and some roosts and things like that. And my lender's like, you don't have anything we can take, so we're gonna have to use the SBA. The SBA cannot turn you down only for lack of collateral. They can turn you down for a lot of reasons, but lack of collateral is not one of them. Okay, and we'll talk about FSA more in our discussion segment at the end, I presume. Realize that many of us, if we're not a large-scale crop or livestock farmer, we might be kind of small potatoes in their book of business. Okay? It's just a reality. Bankers are motivated by credit quantity and credit quality. I have great credit quality. I make my payments as agreed. But you know how much interest my bank earned off of me last year for farming loans in 2025? $80. I didn't pay a lot of interest to my bank last year. And that bank can barely even afford to communicate with me more than once for $80. Okay. So remember that we might be small potatoes. So if we are, strive to find the person that's desperate to build their book of business. Somebody that's young and hungry for customers and is just getting started might be a better match than, the old fart in the picture who's already got a really established book of really large farms who pay a boatload of interest every year. If you're shopping for somebody new, talk about how you could grow, emphasize the prospects for growth with you, because that $80 of interest per year is not going to excite anybody, sorry to say. And make your payments on time, follow your loan agreement as agreed. If you can be a low touch customer, it's not expensive for them to maintain you. Three basic types of loans. Short term, intermediate term, and long term. Boy, does this feel like a pattern in agriculture, like your balance sheet. Short, current, intermediate, and long term. We got short term loans, intermediate term loans, and long term loans, and they are on approximately the same timelines. Magic how that all aligns. Okay, short term loans and lines of credit. So these are the three buckets of loans. Are there billboards and glossy printed materials talking about this brand new loan product? Yeah. Are they actually anything brand new? No, they're probably a repackaging of one of these three basic patterns. Okay. So keep it in mind. There are three basic patterns for three different purposes. Okay. And so you need to know which one of these you're wanting when you go to apply for a loan. The short-term loans or line of credits, those are operating capital for the current growing season. If you ever heard the term revolving line of credit, a large-scale crop farmer might use those to buy seed and to buy inputs, and maybe to pay rent. A specialty crop farmer would probably use it for, well, similar things, seed, inputs, rent, and just financing the operations in those low cash flows parts of the year. You got to get your season started in April. And if nothing has come in for 3 months, it feels pretty skinny. So in addition to holding on to some freaking cash, you guys, hold on to some freaking cash at the end of the year to pay for startup operations the following year. Even if that's not enough, getting a little operating capital from the bank that you pay back the same year with the proceeds from your product sales in the fall can be a really, really useful thing for you. One of these doodads is secured by a UCC filing with the Secretary of State. I'm going to say more about that on the next slide because it's an important point. It's a weird type of collateral that not everybody's heard of if they don't already have a revolving line. Intermediate term loans, 2 to 10 years, that's buying intermediate assets, right? You're buying breeding livestock, you're buying tractors, you're buying trucks, you're buying whatever. All those things, with the exception of the livestock, tend to have a serial number or VIN. Makes it really, really easy to collateralize with the Secretary of State. With the livestock, you might just have to have a description on the Secretary of State document on the UCC filing. Long-term loans are your mortgages, right? Real estate improvements. If you're going to buy land, if you're going to build a barn, if you're going to do things that involve permanent assets affixed to land or the land itself, you're likely to have a long-term loan. 10 years is about the shortest I've ever seen a mortgage. 30 years is the typical longest length of time. Every once in a while, there's an example of a 40-year, but I don't necessarily recommend those. Do a full-fledged comparison of what you'd spend in interest on a 30-year loan versus a 40-year loan. So for a 5% mortgage, as an example for you guys, a 5% mortgage paid over 30 years is going to cost you almost exactly double the amount of interest that a mortgage loan, a 5% mortgage loan over 20 years. So pay attention to the total rent you're paying on that money over the useful life of the loan. Because it might surprise you that that additional rent, it doesn't eke up the monthly payment that terrible much if you did it over 20. So make some of those things part of your consideration when you're getting into loans. So here's that UCC filing thing. This is a document that goes to the Secretary of State with a description of the collateral that is securing a loan. If you get a revolving line of credit, one of those short-term loans that we saw right at the beginning, there's probably going to be this document with a paragraph that looks a little something like this in italics. All farm equipment, machinery, tools, vehicles, livestock, feed, seed, fertilizer, harvested and growing crops, inventory account, chattel paper, documents, instruments, general intangibles, whether now owned or hereafter acquired, wherever located. That's important terminology, you all. That means that the bank is putting its arms around all your stuff that's not real estate. All your tractors, all your livestock, all your cash, all your whatever, that's all collateral for this revolving line of credit that you got. And if you buy another tractor and you buy it with cash, that becomes collateral for their line of credit too, whether now owned or hereafter acquired. What does this do? Do they really want all your crap? No! They want you to pay back that loan with interest, like we talked about earlier. But what it does for the bank is that it puts that institution first in line. So if there were ever a liquidation, they're going to be the first one that gets to pick away at the carcass and hopefully get made whole by selling out your stuff. Does this happen on a regular basis? No, it doesn't. Does it happen sometimes? Yes, because banks get screwed by people. Like it happens. But it's not the desirable route. It is a lose, lose, lose situation for the banker and for the customer. But it does mean that they are first in line. You can look at the UCC search function in your state and you can see, oh, this bank is like first in line with my UCC filing. And rarely do other institutions want to get in line behind. So what that does is it puts you in bed with that financial institution for the foreseeable future because other institutions are probably not going to provide you with any outside financing. So if you get into one of these blanket ag security agreements and they're first in line with that blanket ag security agreement, that's probably your bank for the duration. Is that changeable? Yes, hell yes, absolutely. Everything's changeable. But not until you pay off all your debt that you have with them are they going to terminate that first in line filing. All right. You're going to fill out a credit application. This is going to be the stuff that you're going to have to have. You're going to have an application form. The bank will provide that. 3 years of tax returns. Almost universal 3 years of tax returns. Why? Because they use it instead of your income statement. Even though, as we talked about, it doesn't have the same purpose as your income statement, okay? Or at least not the same clarity. They're going to want a balance sheet, and that balance sheet should include farm stuff and personal stuff, and it's a banker, right? They want to know exactly all the details about the debt. When did it start? What interest rate are you paying? How often are you paying it? What institution's it with? What was it for? When's the last year? Like, so there will be a template for filling all of that stuff out. They're going to want an annual cash flow projection. And I'm going to say, don't provide that. Provide a monthly cash flow projection that has the annual built into it. We'll talk about that in a second. I promise. I keep promising. They are going to do a credit check on you. It is going to be a hard credit check, right? So that's one of those credit checks where They get a report from a credit reporting agency and it dings your score anywhere from 5 to 15 points for a little while. That's why you hear the encouragement to do a bunch of them at the same time if you're applying for a loan, which is good advice because chances are three different hard credit pulls from three different banks is not in the same week is not going to have the same negative effect on your credit score as three hard pulls on your credit over the course of 3 months. Last but not least, you're going to need all the legal mumbo jumbo. If you're an LLC, you're going to have articles of organization, operating agreements. You're going to need to provide insurance, especially on the things that they provide as or that they take as collateral, all that. So all this stuff is going to be required. But if you really want to knock their socks off, bring a couple of additional things. Bring a request, a short one. Bankers don't want to read pages and pages of prose, no matter how beautiful it is. Okay, they don't have the time for that. A concise written request that talks about your research, your experience, and your assumptions. I assume that I'm going to be able to sell 10,000 bushel of corn at $4. I assume that I'm going to be able to sell 1,000 row feet of tomatoes at $3.69 a pound. If you can document those things and they understand where your math is coming from, these are math people, you guys. They're going to like that a lot. If you bring an income statement that better describes your operating profit model than the tax document and the Schedule F, that's going to impress them because they'll start to be able to see what the operating profit model can produce without some of those fluffy non-cash expenditures that go into the Schedule F. I always provide my banker, in addition to my tax return, an income statement, oftentimes an accrual adjusted income statement, instead of just the Schedule F. If you can do a cash flow that isn't just your annual cash flow, I'm going to sell $60,000. I'm going to have $45,000 worth of expenses. I'm going to have $15,000 in net profit at the bottom line, which is what my egg farm often looks like. Okay. If I can do 3 years and I can do that first year month by month, when my expenses are going out, when my revenues are coming in, so they can see the exact lumpiness, the exact seasonality that you're dealing with from a cash flow standpoint. They're going to say, oh, that's why February and March are so crappy for you. You might need to have an operating line of credit in order to get through some of those months. It's a much easier explanation. It's a much easier sell if you can show the monthly dynamics of how money moves through your farm. So that monthly cash flow projection that I'll show you in a minute is better. If you're the type of person that writes full-fledged, glossy, 3-ring binder business and marketing plans, great, bring it. They're going to flip to the end. They're going to read the financial statements first. If those look satisfactory, they might read the rest, at least the executive summary. Is it required to write a 3-ring binder glossy business plan for every loan that you get? No. It's not, but you do have to be able to articulate your profit model, your request, and what it's going to be used for. Last, underwriting. Are they going to say yes? Can they get comfortable with the risks inherent in your credit application? 5 C's of credit. We could talk about this stuff for an hour. Capacity, cash flow. Can you make the payments when they're due? If you're a beginning farmer and you don't have a ton of cash flow through your farm, talk about your off-farm income. If that's still not enough, bring in a cosigner. If it's a seasonality issue, structure your loan so it's an annual payment rather than a monthly. Yes, absolutely, Erin. I will stick around for a couple of minutes to answer questions. I see that I'm running pretty close. I knew I would. It's just too darn much stuff all at once. Second C, capital, skin in the game. Listen, you guys, a bank is not going to provide you 100% of the money necessary to make a transaction. If you want to buy a farm, they're probably going to provide you 65 to 75% of the money that you need to buy that farm. Well, where do I come up with the other 25%? Well, that's a fabulous question. It's a thing that you might have to provide from your own savings. You might have to provide some additional collateral in order to get you to a lower loan to value. So an FSA guarantee is a really, really useful tool to reduce the amount of capital you have to throw in right away. A lot of people are interested in the beginning fire down payment loan, the 540, 550. We can talk about that if people are trying for that. Collateral. What you agree that the bank can collect and sell to get made whole if things go sideways. They're going to make you sign something that says that. They're going to be able to take your things. They don't want to. I keep telling you, they don't want to do that. This is a belt and suspenders approach. Providing operating money or capital money to new entrepreneurs is inherently risky. Not every entrepreneur succeeds. So, belt and suspenders, they got to make sure they can get made whole. The credit history component of this, the score isn't the end all and be all. Do you want to have a good credit score when you're applying for a loan? Yes, you do. Ideally, try to be 650, 670 at the very lowest. Okay. But I also want to indicate that the credit score isn't the only thing that they're looking at. All right. It's not like a mortgage for a house where that's going to determine what your credit score, or excuse me, what your interest rate is. They're going to look for slow pays. Have you made loan payments slowly past due in your credit history? Do you have a bankruptcy? Are there any collections? Any of that kind of stuff. That all shows up on your credit report. If you can pay down any revolving debt, especially credit cards, especially if they're at like Kohl's or other retailers where you got like 15% off to make that one buy God knows how many years ago, pay those things down. And that's going to enhance the look of your credit history. It's going to enhance your liquidity. Conditions, listen, you guys, there weren't a lot of loans made to movie theaters during COVID. Okay. Um, if there is a macroeconomic condition that looks ugly for what it is that you're trying to pursue right now, they're going to be more careful about it. All right. So be aware of sort of the business trends of the industry that you're working in. This is how the balance sheet is going to look like a menu to your banker. They're going to go here and they're going to look at working capital. Total current assets minus total current liabilities. Oh, that's a negative number. Are they going to be able to get through the upcoming year? That looks a little ugly. Debt to asset ratio. Total debt, 954,000. Total assets, 101.984 million. Oh, so I've got a whole bunch more assets than I got debt. Yes, but your debt to asset ratio here is 48%. When you get 50, they're going to scrutinize your loan application a lot harder. When you hit 60% debt to asset, they're probably not going to give you any more financing. So you can't be at 100% debt to asset. The bank can't own as much of your farm as you do. Net worth, that's down here, assets minus liabilities. They can tell whether or not somebody's a beginner or a small timer on net worth. They're going to look at whether or not there's enough stuff that they've got collateral coverage if anything goes wrong. And bullet point. Apparently, I forgot to delete that when I was making my slideshow. They're going to look at your trends. They're going to see how the balance sheet ratios and metrics have moved over the course of the past years. Are you keeping more cash on hand? Are your assets growing? Right? Do you have a greater total amount? What category are they in? Current, intermediate, or long term? How about the liabilities? Are your liabilities going down? Are you acquiring a lot of additional liabilities in the recent past? Is your net worth going up or down? There's a lot of years, you guys, where in agriculture, the profit and loss statement doesn't look very profitable. But if the balance sheet still moved in the right direction, you can make money on the balance sheet even when you're not making money on the P&L. They're going to look at your income statement and trends. They want to know whether or not you got any net profitability. And if you can show them gross profitability, sales minus cost of production, that's going to be a big bonus. They're going to look at your depreciation because it's going to be an indication of how much stuff you have, how much overhead and equipment and infrastructure you've got. Interest expense, are you already paying a bunch of loans? And for sure, they're going to calculate a debt service coverage ratio. What does that mean? Are you producing enough cash to make your proposed debt payments and still have some profitability left over on top? They usually like to see about 15% left over on top. So if you can cover your expenses and you can cover your new mortgage payment and still have a little bit of money left over to live on, they're very likely to approve your land application, land credit application. If you don't have enough cash flow to do those things, they are not very likely to approve it. And here is that magical thing that I kept promising over the course of this presentation, you guys, monthly cash flows. This is going to be so much more informative than that annual cash flow projection. This is going to include all those cash flows from investing, all of those cash flows from financing, and it's going to paint a picture of that seasonal lumpiness that you've got with cash in and cash out. This is a great way to describe your previous years, and you can use all those previous years to inform a projection of what your upcoming year is going to look like. The month-by-month cash flow is one of the more useful tools. So if you walk away from this presentation with two things in your brain, I want to do an enterprise budget for the different enterprise budgets or the different enterprise on my farm, and I want to do a month-to-month cash flow projection for 2026. If you can do those two things, it's going to ratchet you up as a farm financial manager, almost guaranteed. A few parting shots over the bow. A bank turns you down, it's not the end of the world. It might not be their specialty. They might not be hungry for it. It doesn't mean the next bank is going to turn you down. Just because you can get more credit from a dealership, from a payday lender, from an online lender, from whomever, it doesn't mean that you should. The person who has your primary lending relationship is usually going to know more about your financial dossier than anybody who just checks your credit score and says, yep, sure. The worst time to apply for a revolving line of credit, operating capital, is when you most need it. When you look like crap on paper because you've burned through all your money and you still need to get half of your crop in, that's a really rough time to apply for a loan. Because you look like crap on paper. Be proactive. Know when you look good on paper. Know what kind of expenses you're going to have in the upcoming planting season and apply for the credit then. Loan terms are negotiable to an extent. Well, all the mortgages are 7% right now. Can I ask for 2? It's like, yeah, you can ask for it, but they're not going to give it to you. There's cost of funds, right? But if your mortgage is at 7%, could you ask for 6.5? Now you're talking about a reasonable conversation. And last but not least, loans do not stay the same forever, and sometimes not even through their normal amortizable life. People refinance loans all the time. Farmers, get a certain amount of, equity position in a loan. They say, can you release this piece of collateral? Sure. Yeah, we don't need it anymore. We got plenty of loan to value. So things are changeable. Even if you want to do a thing and your, 10-year tractor loan isn't complete yet, you still might be able to do that thing by refinancing the tractor loan. Okay. All right. This is the resource slide. These are all linked. It has that farm accounting page from Missouri. It has a bunch of neat resources from MSUE, farm management, okay, balance sheet template, income statement template, accounting software options, and a QuickBooks chart of accounts example. And then I also put in some nice publications for the Center for Regional Food Systems. Down here, the FSA 2001, if you want to be an FSA customer, that is going to be the application you're going to fill out. So, buying farmland, I know everybody's situation is different. And I want to have this as sort of a couple minutes of discussion rather than slides about the way that you should do it. But a couple of main points. Land is always expensive. No matter what time of life that you're in, land is always going to feel expensive unless you're inheriting it or unless somebody's giving you a really freaking sweet deal. And both of those things are rare. Land loans take a long time to approve, so don't expect to approve, like apply to FSA and be approved for buying a land for a land purchase tomorrow. Literally 3 to 6 months. You don't have to own land in order to farm. Some of you who are working in incubators or on rent land know that already. And not everyone is a fit for the 1.875% land mortgage that FSA makes available. Not everyone's a fit. If you haven't got 3 years of farming under your belt, you might not be a fit. And by the way, it's not 1.875 for the whole amount. It's just for the amount that FSA takes on, and then there's amount that a conventional bank takes on, which is going to be higher. So these are some of the points that like I wanted to throw out there in the universe about buying farmland, because I know that they're common points of discussion and common points of conflict. Um, and we can talk about some of those during the Q&A, but I want to go the direction that you guys need to go in terms of land stuff. So that's what I've got. There's our contact information for the Food Finance Institute. There's a QR code if you want to scan it. These slides will be made available to you in PDF format before too long here. And I would love for Erin to tell me how to do a discussion.